And good morning once again, Living Hope Community Church, Iglesia Esperanza Viviente, and my brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ throughout the world. God bless you. Here we are again today to look into John chapter 19 as we explore another Living Hope Today devotional to try to understand what did the Lord go through when he died for us. The trial is laid out for us in all four Gospels. Each writer brings different details to light. And today we'll look at John's example of what happened. It's so insightful to see two things. One is evil has done everything it can to silence the Son of God. All through the ministry of Jesus, they've been after him. Their hearts are hard. They want to kill him. The Jewish leadership has been after him. They haven't been able to touch him until this moment. Jesus has now been arrested. He's been brought before Annas, the high priest, before Caiaphas, the appointed high priest of the Roman. They appointed him. He's been brought before the Sanhedrin. He's been brought before Pilate first and then to Herod, and now back to Pilate. This is the final stage of Jesus' trial. Very insightful to see what the Lord goes through for you and I. Let's look at it together. If I can get this to work correctly. Let's see here. Time out. Sorry about that, church. Here we go. I think. There we are. We're going to back up and start at John 18. It must be Monday morning, huh? Look at this. Sorry. We'll take a run at it from 1839. It says, "But you have a custom that I should release one man for you at the Passover. So do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews?" This is Pilate asking the Jewish leadership and the crowd that's gathered whether they want Jesus or they want Barabbas. And you remember their answer. They cried out again, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now, Barabbas was a robber. We looked at that last week. And we see that the Jews are intent on killing Jesus. They're stirring up the crowd to choose Barabbas. They will not stand for Jesus being released, even though there has been no charge, no accusation that's been authenticated. There's nothing this man has done. Pilate knows it. Matthew tells us Pilate realizes that the Jews are after Jesus because of envy. Well, they choose the robber. They reject the Messiah. So what does Pilate do? This first move in 19:1 is sort of, I think it's sort of a way for Pilate to appease the Jewish leadership. Pilate does not want to kill Jesus. Then Pilate took Jesus and flogged him. Another word for this is scourged. You know, the Jews had in their law that you could whip a man's back 40 lashes minus one, because the 39 lashes was most likely to keep him alive. The 40th lash was most likely to kill him. Well, the Romans had no such boundary. Okay, when this says that they flogged Jesus, they whipped him mercilessly. In fact, if you read history, you'll see that in Roman tradition, sometimes it took up to 6 soldiers to properly scourge a victim. Why? Because, excuse me, because the physical exertion necessary to perform the scourging was so strenuous on the Roman soldiers that it took several of them to get involved, because one would get tired, then the next, all the way through 6 soldiers. I mean, just imagine Jesus is being lacerated and beaten to a pulp. I mean, he is just being, well, as the Romans call it, scourged. And the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns. Again, a very painful experience and a mockery of the claims Jesus has made. They put a crown of thorns on his head and arrayed him in a purple robe. So they are addressing him as if he's royalty. They're putting a crown on him although it's a crown of thorns. In other words, along with the scourging goes the mocking. And we see in verse 3, and they came up to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." They are addressing him correctly, but it's out of hatred, mockery. They have no intent to mean what they're saying here. They struck him with their hands. Now, before we read verse 4, just think about this. The Creator that has made each one of these persons that are mocking Jesus and hating Jesus and hurting Jesus, he is willfully submitting to their punishment. He is willfully allowing himself to be scourged and mocked, and the crown of thorn is placed on him, and knowing full well that on Judgment Day he is the one that will determine every participant's eternal destiny. In fact, he'll determine ours as well, every one of us. Yet he allows himself to go through this. Verse 4, Pilate went out again and said to them, "See, I am bringing him out to you that you may know that" what? "I find no guilt in him." Wow, then Pilate, why did you just have him beaten to a bloody pulp if you find no guilt in him? Because I'm trying to appease the Jews. I'm trying to appease the Jews. You remember we studied in chapter 18, Pilate tries to give Jesus over to the Jews. You take him, judge him by your own law. But the scripture has predicted that Jesus will be lifted up when he dies. The Jews would kill him through stoning, which would mean thrown on the ground and hit with rocks until he died. The Romans crucify people. Okay, so because of the prophecies and the predictions made about the death of the Messiah, it has to happen that the Romans crucify him by lifting him up, not the Jews throw him down and stone him. Okay, well, this fulfills the prophecy, and this is why the Jews come back to Pilate and say, "We don't want to judge him by our own law. You have the right to capital punishment. Even though you're giving the right to us, we don't want it." The Jews don't want it because they don't want to be seen by the populace as the ones who have directly killed Jesus, even though they're responsible for his death. They don't want to take the blowback from the people who know that Jesus is from God. Pilate standing before them in verse 4 saying, "I find no guilt in him." So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." What a tragic scene that must have been to see the Son of God beaten to a bloody pulp, probably almost barely unable to stand under the bleeding in his back and the blows that he's received. Yet Pilate brings him forward and says, "Behold the man." When the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out. Now here you see it. This is the Jewish leadership. "Crucify him, crucify him." This is total rejection of the Messiah by the people of Judaism, by the leadership of Judaism, by the majority. God's people ultimately absolutely rejecting God's Messiah. Pilate said to them, here, another act of appeasement, another act of Pilate trying to get out of this. "Take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no guilt in him." Again, Pilate is doing his best to get out of this. He's looked at Jesus. He's seen what they've said about Jesus. Just think about the accusations against Jesus. They've said, well, he's threatened to destroy the temple, even though he hadn't. He's evil. They say he's operating as Satan's agent, even though he's not. They've accused him of perverting the nation. He hasn't. They've accused him of forbidding the Jews to pay tax to Caesar. He's not done that. They've accused him of stirring up the people to rebel. He hasn't done that. They've said that he's claimed himself to be a king and he's a threat to Caesar. Well, he has claimed himself to be a king, but he's no threat to Caesar. He's not trying to have a political kingdom at this time and place. No, he has said he's a king, and he has absolutely demonstrated that he is who he says he is. He is a king. He is the Lord. He is God in the flesh. Who can raise people from the dead? Who can make blind eyes see? Who can control nature with a word? Only Jesus, God in the flesh. But despite all the proof that he is who he says he is, the Jews have leveled all these accusations against him, and none of them have had any substance to them. So in 19:7 we read this: the Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law he ought to die, because he has made himself the Son of God." Uh-oh. Now there's an accusation of blasphemy. Now it is true in Old Testament law, a blasphemer was to be stoned to death. And Jesus would have been a blasphemer had he claimed to be the Son of God without actually being the Son of God. But Jesus has verified his claim time and time again over 3 years of time in ministry to tell them he is the Son of God. Now they accuse him of blasphemy with the very truth that he is. And listen to this: when Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. It's not in John's gospel, but Pilate's wife has had a dream. She's warned him about dealing with Jesus. Pilate knows these guys are operating out of envy and that they are not genuinely involved in trying to find justice. Pilate is a judge. He understands that you have to have an accusation before you can execute a man. You have to have somebody that broke the law before you can kill them. But none of this matters to this rabid Jewish leadership crowd that wants the Messiah dead out of the envy of their own hearts and out of the jealousy that they've received. Plus, Jesus has never pulled any punches when he's talking to these guys. When they say they're children of Abraham, he says, "You're children of the devil." He tells them the truth about themselves. Misguided religious power brokers don't like to hear the truth about themselves, and they'll do anything they can to shut somebody up who tells them the truth. They've got Jesus on the ropes here, and they think they're winning. They're going to kill him. They think that this is going to solve the problem. Oh, wow. Are they ever wrong about that? So, Pilate's scared. What does he do? He enters the headquarters again, and he says to Jesus, "Where are you from?" Jesus, I need to know a little more. They're now telling me you're claiming to be the Son of God. And you have to remember how a Roman pagan idolater would hear that. They have all kinds of gods in their tradition of paganism in Rome. And these gods have children. They have many human characteristics. And so in their superstition and their misguided approach to reality in terms of who God is, Pilate might actually be terrified at this moment, thinking that in fact Jesus could be somewhere lined up in this list of idols of gods in his mythology. He is genuinely terrified, but he, again, as we spoke of earlier, he is leveraged. He cannot allow more trouble from the Jewish people to go back to be reported to Rome. He'll lose his job for sure. He may even lose his life to be branded as a leader that cannot function properly. He asked Jesus, "Where are you from?" And here's where Jesus goes silent. The King of Kings, the one that will judge all, is now silent, like a sheep before its shearers. He is silent before Pilate. Pilate can't believe it. So Pilate said to him, "Will you not speak to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you?" Keep in mind, Pilate only has this authority because Jesus gave it to him. In fact, that's exactly what Jesus tells him. Jesus answered, "You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin." Pilate, you don't have any authority that wasn't given to you by God. Now, Jesus has this choice, right? He can speak to Pilate right here. He can explain his innocence, and Pilate can have a reason to perhaps treat him less harshly, maybe even let him go. If Jesus was simply interested in saving his physical life, here's a place for him to interject. But Jesus isn't interested in saving his natural physical life. He's interested in saving our souls. He understands that through the Father's will, the only way that can be accomplished is if sin is punished. And he understands that if sin is punished, our disobedience receives its due punishment, its just punishment, that all of us will be condemned before the judgment seat of a holy God. He knows that if he continues forward silently to suffer and to die on our behalf, that he will be punished for our sin. He will be the one that brings justice to God by God satisfying his justice, pouring out his wrath on Jesus. He understands these things, and so he continues not to play for his physical survival, but to live his life to do what his Father wants. What a great testimony to us. What an example to us of who Jesus is and how far he will go to obey his Father. From then on, Pilate sought to release him. Look at that. After Jesus has given him the answer about authority, Pilate wants to release him, but the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend." Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar. Again, this is the knife to Pilate's heart. Why? Because Pilate is leveraged now. Once they bring Caesar into the discussion, Pilate knows that this is where they may report him. This is where they may kill his career, if not bring him to his own death at the hands of the Romans. So what does Pilate do? So when Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out, sat down on the judgment seat, the bench. We even call our judgment seats today the bench. That's where the judge sits, at the place called the stone pavement, or in Aramaic, Gabbatha. And what does he say? Now, it was the day of the preparation of the Passover. This is exactly God's timing when the Messiah is to be slain for the sins of the people. It was about the 6th hour. He said to the Jews, "Behold your king." And what did the Jews say? They cried out, away with him, crucify him. "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar," the ultimate betrayal of the Messiah. We want this guy dead. Oh, terrible. So Pilate acquiesces. He delivered him over to them to be crucified. Evil looks like it's winning. God's plan is right on time. The Messiah will be sacrificed on the Passover. He will fulfill the Old Testament sacrificial system. He will die so that you and I, through his sacrifice, can receive the righteousness of God. Think of the price God paid to bring you into right relationship. Serve him with all your heart today. I pray God blesses you, church.
Who is it who for sinners shed his blood, and now for cleansing all can plunge beneath that flood? It's Jesus. But do you know who he is? He's the image of the invisible God, and he's the brightness of his glory. The first, the last, the future, the past. He is God.